This Baldur's Gate 3 series covers how to do all major quests and missable content in order so that all achievements or trophies, choices, and major rewards will be available. We will be striving to get the most optimal or good outcome for all companions, recruit the most allies, obtain all legendary weapons and armor, and have an overall satisfying playthrough. For best results, follow this series from the start of Part 1. Spoilers will be limited to important information, and as usual, useful timestamps can be found in the video description. In these earlier videos, I'll also be giving some pointers for newer players that are not as familiar with the mechanics of Baldur's Gate 3. That being said, there should be plenty of useful information for even experienced players with multiple playthroughs. Part 1 of this series will take us from character creation through our arrival at the Druid's Grove. There's a lot to cover, so let's get started. To start, we're going to play on Tactician difficulty for the critical hit achievement, and choose the custom character origin. This will allow us to save all the tieflings, which cannot be done with the Dark Urge origin. You can choose whichever starting class and race you want, but I will also be explaining my own playstyle and builds for this character and others as we progress through the game, in case you want to follow along or copy anything. For my own part, I'll be playing as a high half-elf sorcerer. I went with sorcerer for multiple reasons. Their primary trait is charisma, making them good at negotiations, which will make achieving good outcomes much easier. In addition, sorcerers gain access to meta magic. More specifically, we will have access to Twinned Spell, which when combined with haste, will make combat encounters much easier starting at level 5. The reason why I chose half-elf is that they get the Civil Militia feature, which grants proficiency with shields. Humans also get this feature, and it is great for spellcasters. I'll be taking the utility spell Light as my high elf cantrip. And for my 4 sorcery cantrips, I will be getting Bone Chill, Ray of Frost, Shocking Grasp, and Firebolt. For starting spells, I'll be taking Mage Armor and Magic Missile. For the subclass, I'll be going with Storm Sorcery as it's the strongest sorcerer subclass in my opinion, and provides additional combat spells. The Guild Artisan background will provide us with Insight and Persuasion proficiency, both of which will help us in negotiations. If all this stuff is new to you, don't worry, everything will be explained in due time. For ability points, I have adjusted them so that both Dexterity and Charisma are at 16, and Constitution is at 14. As a sorcerer, Charisma will determine the effectiveness of our spells. Meanwhile, both Dexterity and Constitution will improve our survivability. Finally, we will select skill proficiencies. Intimidation and Deception are both worth taking. From there, all that's left to do is customize the appearance of both your character and your guardian, and then venture forth. As a sorcerer, the first thing we'll want to do every adventuring day is use Mage Armor. This will raise our AC or armor class up to 16, making us significantly harder to hit with targeted attacks. The spell will use a level 1 spell slot, which we currently have 2 of. In this first room, we can interact with the nursery to perform our first skill ability check. In this case, it's the investigation skill being used. For any ability check, we roll a 20-sided die, also known as a d20, then add our modifier to get the result. For me, that modifier is 0. If the total result is equal to or higher than the particular skill check's difficulty class or DC, we will succeed. If it's less than the DC, we fail. In this case, the DC is 10, and don't worry if you fail this check as it's ultimately of little importance. We can use the nearby alien device to restore our spell slots or other resources, then move on to the next room. Feel free to look around and loot any bodies or other containers. To highlight things that are generally worth interacting with, hold the Alt button on keyboard mouse or right stick click on a controller. This is a very useful mechanic to start taking advantage of early on. We can activate a lift in this room and ride it up to find a person with an open cranium, and this is an opportunity to get a temporary ally, called Us, that can also be found later in the game. To get it, you must choose the dialogue option where you try to help, then succeed in one of 3 ability checks. For my character, Dexterity gets the highest bonus, +3, so I will use that to free the brain. Saving us is not required for any achievements, but if you really want this little brain guy as a companion, you can save the game before rolling the ability check. That way, if you fail, you can load the save and try again. This is known as save-scumming, and in order to get all the achievements and ideal outcomes, it may be necessary to do on occasion. That being said, we will play in such a way that gives us the best odds of success, so that save-scumming is rarely needed. After prying the brain free, you can mutilate it to make it more docile, but this is unnecessary. Up ahead, we will meet our first major companion, Lae'zel the Githyanki. In addition, after speaking with her, we will get our first combat encounter, and this is a good time to explain the basic mechanics. Combat in this game is turn-based, and the order that characters take their turn in is determined by their initiative roll. In general, characters with higher dexterity will have higher initiative, and get to go before the characters with lower initiative. Since all my characters are grouped up in the initiative order, their turns take place simultaneously, allowing for better coordination of attacks. During each turn, a character is allowed to move a certain distance, determined by their movement speed. Generally, this is 30 feet. A character also gets one action, which is typically required for primary weapon attacks and most spells, and one bonus action, which is required for more minor actions such as shove, using a potion, and jump, although jump also requires 10 feet of movement speed. You can see what resources different abilities require by hovering over them. For this combat encounter, I'm going to start by using my 2 melee fighters to attack different targets, then clean up with my sorcerer using magic missile. After the fight, we'll use the restoration device, then continue towards the helm. In this next room, there are 2 unconscious thralls that we can defeat to get some free experience points. In addition, another potential companion, Shadowheart, is trapped in the nearby Mind Flayer pod. To free her, head through the door to the east. The first body on the ground has a key which we will use in short order. Near the back end of this area is a console that you can interact with for a short cutscene. There's also a second body with an Eldritch rune, which we will need to free Shadowheart. You can also grab the green brain jar, which has a purely lore-based use quite a bit later in the game. Returning to the room with Shadowheart, we can open the elaborate reliquary chest with a gold key for some loot, grab the brain jar, then go to free Shadowheart. To do this, interact with the nearby console and insert the Eldritch rune. You may want to save before this skill check, as failing it could mean losing Shadowheart as a companion. This is very unlikely though, as you only need to meet a DC of 2 to succeed. Once Shadowheart is free, we'll speak with and allow her to join the party. Before moving on, you can open Shadowheart's spellbook and switch out the Shield of Faith spell with Bless, which is a fantastic support spell for combat. Looking at Bless, you might notice that it lasts for 10 turns and requires concentration. A character can only concentrate on one spell at a time, so if you cast any other spell that also requires concentration, it will end the previous spell that was being concentrated on. Once ready, we'll move south towards the helm. Before going in, we can prepare for combat by entering turn-based mode. On a controller, do this by pressing the right trigger, then selecting the turn-based mode option. This allows us to efficiently use various buff spells or abilities with short durations, such as Bless, before entering a combat encounter. For now, all we really have is Shadowheart's Bless, which can target up to 3 allies. We can then use another character's action to activate the nearby alien device, replenishing the level 1 spell slot that Shadowheart used to cast Bless. A good rule to follow is to save the game before every combat encounter, so we'll do that here. Next, we'll exit turn-based mode so all characters stay grouped up, then quickly enter the helm through the sphincter door before Bless has a chance to wear off. Our main objective here is to reach the transponder and escape, but we can also defeat some if not all of the minor enemies along the way to get some bonus experience points. I'll say here that there is an achievement for defeating Commander Zyke, the fiend fighting the Mind Flayer. It's called Devils in the Details. However, on Tactician difficulty, that just isn't feasible, not unless you want to save scum a whole lot to make sure the Mind Flayer always hits the commander on each of its turns, and also that the commander misses the Mind Flayer on each of its own turns. Realistically, to get this achievement, you are much better off starting a new character on the easiest difficulty, which will make the task of defeating the commander substantially easier. Also, as a warning, if you turn the difficulty down to easy on this playthrough to defeat Commander Zyke, then continue playing on the same save and turn the difficulty back to Tactician, you won't be able to get the critical hit achievement for beating the game on Tactician. So with that in mind, just move all characters steadily towards the transponder while taking shots at the various minor enemies along the way. Using your bonus action to jump is a good way to increase the distance you are able to cover in a single turn, especially for characters with high strength, which allows them to jump further. All it's going to take is one character interacting with the transponder to finally escape the Nautiloid. After the cutscene, we'll awaken to a new adventuring day, so put on any daily buffs such as mage armor before continuing. Our first objective will be to recruit all companions in the beach area, starting with Shadowheart right nearby. We'll speak through her dialogue and agree to team up. If you earned enough XP on the Nautiloid, you should also reach level 2, which will make the next encounter significantly easier. Shadowheart doesn't get much at level 2, but if you are playing a sorcerer, you will be able to choose a new spell, and I highly recommend Shield, as it's a great defensive spell. In addition, you'll get to choose 2 meta magic options. For this, Twin Spell is a must, and Distant Spell also comes in handy. Moving on, feel free to loot the coastline up towards the northeast. You'll find camping supplies along with at least one set of thieves' tools. Once ready, we'll head west for the next combat encounter with some intellect devourers. Up to this point, we haven't been able to initiate combat on our own terms, so let's quickly cover how to surprise our enemy, which will give us a huge advantage. First, get everyone into sneak mode by clicking Shift+C on keyboard mouse, or by holding the down button on the D-pad if using a controller. We'll save the game just in case, then move closer to the enemies. Enter turn-based mode to have better control, then move in for an attack on the enemy while staying out of sight. Ranged attacks often work best for this. If you successfully hit the enemy while sneaking, they and any nearby enemies will get the surprised condition. Surprise basically causes the affected creature to have their first turn in combat skipped, giving the ambushers a huge advantage. Also note that any allies that are also sneaking will probably not be automatically entered into the combat encounter. In that case, you'll have to switch over to them and either exit hiding or launch an attack of their own at the enemy to get them in the turn order. Another tip for combat encounters is to end your turn while staying back and out of sight of enemies. This will force them to waste their action on dashing in order to close the distance. By making use of surprise mechanics and playing tactically, this otherwise difficult early encounter is handled with relative ease. If you need to heal after the encounter, you can expend a short rest. Short rests heal half of each character's hit point maximum and restore certain resources depending on the class. One example being the Channel Divinity charges of a cleric. You get 2 short rests per adventuring day, and both are replenished when taking a long rest, but more on that later. Before moving on, make sure to loot the surrounding bodies and containers, as there should be some useful items, such as a potion of speed. Next, we'll head further west to recruit our second companion, Astarion the Rogue. After a small altercation, Astarion will apologize for the misunderstanding. You can accept Astarion's apology or reject it. Accepting his apology will gain approval from Shadowheart, and this is a good time to explain the approval system. Different companions will either approve or disapprove of specific actions you take, most of which occur through dialogue choices. Each companion reacts differently, and for Shadowheart, she approves of discretion above all else. On the other hand, Astarion mostly approves of cruelty, but regardless, we should be able to get him to toe the line. Ultimately, the approval system is a crucial mechanic in Baldur's Gate 3, and raising approval with companions will cause them to open up and share personal information about their past, motivations, and willingness to engage in romance. If you are ever worried about how a companion might react to a choice you're about to make, just save the game beforehand so that you can go back if needed. I'll do my best to point out key opportunities for raising companion approval when possible, as well as how to avoid disapproval. As a reminder, here is where we are at on the map just to help everyone follow along. Before moving on, we can interact with the frightened boar. A successful animal handling check here will result in gaining more approval from Shadowheart. Whenever we do an ability check, we'll want to take advantage of the guidance spell from Shadowheart. It's a cantrip, so it won't consume any spell slots, and it adds an additional 4-sided die or d4 to our skill checks, increasing the likelihood of success. Next, we can briefly move west, jumping down to a secluded area near the coastline. There, a boulder can be shuffled out of the way by Shadowheart to reveal a chest. Inside, we'll find 2 potions of speed, valuables, and a map and book from the Harper faction. We'll be sure to read any books or notes that we come across, as they will contribute to the Bookworm achievement, and can provide important information for quests or add markers on the map for supply caches. Next, we'll move north into the crashed Nautiloid, where an encounter with a dying Mind Flayer awaits. You can try to learn more about the Mind Flayer at the risk of having your brains eaten, or just finish it off instead, and I recommend the latter. We'll loot the Mind Flayer for another chance at a potion of speed, then move east to find and loot a final Mind Flayer. At this point, we should have a handful of potions of speed. These are extremely strong, and we can save them for any particularly difficult combat encounters. Moving on, we'll head north to the ancient Sigil Circle. Save your game before interacting with it, as this is where a third companion, Gale, can either be saved or lost at the roll of a die. Depending on your class, you may get to choose a special ability check to save Gale, such as Charisma with sorcerers. Gale is a kind-hearted, if a bit overconfident wizard that approves of those who make peace, avoid conflict, and help the innocent. In short, he'll be very easy to get along with and gain the approval of. After saving Gale, we'll agree to team up and increase his level to 2. As a wizard, subclass selection becomes available at level 2, and I've always liked the Divination subclass, as it gives us access to the Portent subclass feature. Portent gives Gale 2 pre-rolled d20s that can be used to replace any attack roll or saving throw made by a nearby creature during combat. I also really like taking the Longstrider spell on Gale as soon as possible. This spell can be cast as a ritual. What that means is that if you use it out of combat and while not in turn-based mode, it does not consume a spell slot. This means Gale can give all his companions and himself the Longstrider buff, which increases movement speed by 10 feet per turn, and it lasts until taking a long rest. Gale is also a spellcaster without any form of physical armor, so make sure to use mage armor on him before moving on. Before finding the last beach-bound companion, we'll head a short distance west to loot some goblins. From there, move north. There's a small patch of burning ground which we can either jump over or neutralize with ice or water. The only thing we want up here at this moment is a shovel, which can be found stuck in a dirt mound. Shovels allow us to dig up chests from dirt mounds, which often contain useful loot. From there, we'll head back east to find Lae'zel, trapped by tieflings and in need of rescue. In order to get the Leave No One Behind achievement, we cannot harm the tieflings, so instead use deception to trick the tieflings into leaving peacefully. Some classes, such as monks, will have access to alternative ability checks in order to resolve things peacefully. In any case, once we've peacefully gotten rid of the tieflings, we can free Lae'zel. We can tell her that she needs to say please in order to score some easy approval points with both Astarion and Shadowheart. Afterwards, we'll shoot out the bottom of the trap to free Lae'zel. Shadowheart will disapprove of teaming up with Lae'zel, but there is a pretty simple trick to avoiding companion disapproval. Simply take control of the character that will disapprove, ungroup them from the rest of the party. This is done by clicking G on the keyboard or through the party interface when using a controller, and then move them a fair distance from the interaction. Doing so will prevent that companion from registering your actions, thereby avoiding the loss in approval. Just make sure that you remember to group everyone back up afterwards so as to keep the party moving as a single unit. When you agree to join forces with Lae'zel, she'll tell you to make room in your party. At this point, you can either make room for her or have her go wait at camp instead. I'm going to make room by telling Astarion to return to camp. And although companions may pout or complain about it, telling them to return to camp will not have any impact on their approval or anything else for that matter. I had Lae'zel join the party, increased her level to 2, and had Gale cast Longstrider on her. We'll make sure the party is all grouped up and move east towards the chapel ruins. Upon arrival, we'll be accosted by several looters. We can attack them or talk our way out of the situation. Now, this is a good point to take a long rest, for story and companion approval purposes if nothing else. At the camp, it's a good idea to speak with our companions. If we speak with Shadowheart and agree that finding a healer is the top priority, we'll gain some approval with both Gale and Shadowheart. We can also speak with Shadowheart and choose the "we should get to know each other more" option, then choose "if you're not comfortable, I won't press you" to gain additional approval points. With Astarion, he should offer to stay up and keep watch. Picking "thank you, I'll sleep better for that" will get us some approval points with him. With Lae'zel, we can ask her if she knows much about mind flayers, and following that, about what happens if a cure isn't found. Finally, we can say that's not going to happen, we will find a cure, to get some approval points from her. For Gale, he should start the conversation with "go to hell." Responding with "and a good evening to you" will get us some approval. Now, when taking a long rest, you can either use camp supplies for a full long rest, or save camp supplies and take a partial long rest instead. For my situation, a partial long rest will be just fine, and we will be taking another long rest soon. A quick bonus tip I have is to make a manual or permanent save at the start of each adventuring day. They serve as excellent checkpoints to load back to. We'll start the new adventuring day by getting all of our buffs in order. Once that's taken care of, we'll leave camp and venture into the chapel ruins. We can shoot down the nearby foundation block with a ranged attack. Don't enter just yet, but this will open a hole down into the ruins. There is a group of enemies that will need to be taken care of, and we are going to get the jump on them. Group up around the entrance and have the group enter sneak mode, then toggle turn-based mode and jump in. We're going to strategically position our characters around the sides of the door so that they stay out of sight. Move the wooden chest in the way of the door so as to block anyone trying to walk in. Then save the game and end everyone's turn. If all goes right, no one will discover your party in the time that passes. At this point, we'll select one of our characters with ranged attack options and hit one of the enemies from hiding. This should cause all the enemies to be surprised. Next, have another character with the Firebolt spell hit the oil barrel just beyond the door. This will cause an explosion that will decimate the enemy's numbers and lead to very easy cleanup. There's one other enemy in the chamber to the north that we can also get the drop on. In addition, there are plenty of food or camp supplies on the nearby table. We'll loot all of the fallen enemies, then move to the southernmost room in this area. There are plenty of books to find and read here, but what we are mainly looking for is the lever on the southern wall of the chamber. Pulling it will open a new passage leading to the west, which is where we are heading next. After looting everything in the immediate vicinity of this new area, we'll want to split off from the group and go through the doors to the south. It's also a good idea for us to save before doing this. We don't want to loot the central sarcophagus as it is trapped. Instead, we'll loot the smaller entombments near the room's periphery first. One of these containers will have a shield, which I'll be equipping to my sorcerer, and Gale can also make use of it. Another of these containers will have a soul coin, which a companion that we have yet to meet can make use of. Once we've looted all the surrounding containers, we'll position ourselves between the central sarcophagus and the room where the rest of our companions are. Approach the sarcophagus, then enter turn-based mode. We'll loot the engraved key and Watcher's Guide magic spear from the sarcophagus, then skirt around the grease that appears on the ground and return to our companions, using dash if necessary. Upon leaving turn-based mode, the room will be inundated with fire and explosions. At this point, we'll group the party back up and go through the doors to the north, which we now have the key for. To the west is a small room with a sarcophagus where another soul coin can be found. There is also a Book of the Dead Gods, which if you manage to open and successfully read, will gain some approval with Shadowheart and inspiration for both Gale and Shadowheart. Next up, we'll have to face off with a group of skeletons, and I'm going to position and hide my characters to prepare and get the jump on them. Once ready, we'll enter turn-based mode and have a character interact with a button in the northwest corner of the room. This will open a door to a secret room nearby, as well as unleash a handful of reanimated skeletons. By carefully positioning our characters, we should be able to get a surprise attack on them to initiate the combat encounter. After the encounter, head into that newly opened room and open the sarcophagus. We'll meet a new helpful NPC by the name of Withers. Answer Withers' questions sufficiently and he'll head off to our camp. Before going there ourselves, let's loot Withers' sarcophagus for yet another soul coin along with some valuables. In the nearby heavy chest, we'll also find the Amulet of Lost Voices, which allows the wearer to cast Speak with Dead at will. At this point, we'll take our second long rest. The first thing I recommend doing is to take control of Shadowheart and speak with Withers in the westmost room. Ask Withers what kind of services can a skeleton offer, then speak through the rest of his dialogue. You should be able to speak with Withers again and change Shadowheart's class for 100 gold, and you can also do this with any other character. I'm going to switch Shadowheart to a Light Domain Cleric and optimize her ability score points. Light Domain Clerics are all around incredible. The Light Domain spells, Warding Flare subclass feature, and Radiance of Dawn channel divinity that they gain at level 2 all make for an extremely formidable combatant. After handling that, we can go ahead and speak with our companions. It doesn't seem like there is any approval to be gained with Shadowheart, Gale, or Lae'zel, but all of them should have new things to say. Astarion, on the other hand, will ask how we would want to go out if we were to become a Mind Flayer. If we say, not sure, how would you like to go, then follow it up with, decapitation sounds good actually, we will get some approval points with him. Afterwards, we can take our long rest, and this time I'll be using camp supplies to gain all the benefits of a full long rest. After performing our morning rituals, we will fast travel back to the roadside cliffs and head north past a broken carriage. There is a battle up ahead, so I'm going to have Shadowheart bless everyone but herself, then have the party climb the nearby hill to the north for a good vantage point. There are quite a few enemies in this encounter, but fortunately we will also have plenty of allies to back us up, so we can lean on them in order to conserve resources. We'll just need to do enough to keep any of them from dying. To that end, the bugbear is capable of dealing a lot of damage, so I always prioritize defeating him first. Once the raiding party has been dealt with, we'll visit the nearby Ancient Sigil Circle to activate a new fast travel point. Then, we'll loot all the bodies for sellable loot and a shield, which we can equip Gale with. Zakrug the Goblin boss should also have the Gloves of Power on him, which are good when equipped by Lae'zel or any other martial class. There are a good deal of important tasks to take care of in the Druid Grove, saving several tieflings among them, all of which and more will be covered in the next part of this series. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me in the comments where I'll do my best to help. If you want to see more great guides, you can head over to my channel, and if you're new, consider subscribing. You're helping me feed my cat. Her name's Marshmallow. Have a great day. If you're here today, have a great Friday and a great weekend, and as always, thanks for watching.